Justice is such a thing that if someone gets justice, they can breathe in peace. But if someone does not get justice, they stop breathing right there. Today's story is about justice and our country, the United States. It's about a court that is very old, a court where harsh decisions have been made. In its long history, many criminals have been punished, and while some were guilty and deserved their punishment, there were other decisions that caused immense suffering. Because of those decisions, many believe that spirits still haunt the halls of this court. Today's story is about a lawyer, and if you listen to it, you'll think twice before stepping into a courtroom again. The story begins with a lawyer named Mark Reynolds, who worked at the New York Supreme Court. This incident happened in 2022, but it traces back to around 1976. Mark had recently won a major case, and to celebrate, he decided to spend time with his friends. They went to a restaurant near the courthouse to unwind after their victory. As the night grew late, Mark said, "It's getting late, and we have to be at court early tomorrow. We should leave." As they stepped outside, there was a deep, eerie silence. The streets were empty, and the night was cloaked in darkness. Everyone decided to go their separate ways, but Mark started walking in the opposite direction from the others, toward the courthouse. His friend James stopped him and asked, "Why are you going that way? The highway is on the right." Mark replied, "I need to use the restroom. There wasn't one in the restaurant, so I'll use the one at the courthouse." James responded, "It's so late. Why go to the courthouse? Just go here on the street somewhere." But Mark, being a man of principle, refused to do anything improper in public. Ignoring James, he headed toward the courthouse. James, not wanting to leave him alone, waited outside, thinking Mark would be back in a few minutes. The courthouse was old, and at night it was engulfed in darkness, a stark contrast to the busy mornings filled with light. Mark entered and made his way through the dimly lit halls. The only light came from a small window where moonlight spilled in. Still, he wasn't scared after all. He was a lawyer, a rational man, and he didn't believe in superstitions. As Mark walked toward the restroom, he entered a corridor that was completely dark. Suddenly, he heard the sound of jingling, like the tinkling of anklets. He stopped in his tracks. The rational part of his mind told him it was just his imagination, but the sound persisted, closer this time. Gathering his courage, he looked behind him, nothing but darkness. He continued walking, but then he heard the sound again, this time almost right next to him. His courage began to waver, and his hair stood on end. He tried to stay calm, but when he turned around, there was something there. It felt like someone touched his neck, sending shivers down his spine. His fear grew, and before he knew it, he was running down the hall. But just as he turned a corner, he ran straight into a woman. She was standing there, making the same anklet sound. Mark, terrified, stumbled and fell, hitting his head against the wall. As he lay there, dazed, he saw the woman approaching. His vision blurred as he lost consciousness. Outside, James, who had been waiting, noticed that too much time had passed. Worried, he entered the courthouse to check on Mark. The air inside felt heavy, and James felt like someone was watching him. As he reached the corridor, he saw someone lying on the ground. It was Mark. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman crouching next to him. She had long, tangled hair, and to James' horror, she wasn't wearing any clothes. Trembling, he approached cautiously. But as James got closer, he realized that the woman didn't have a head. She turned toward him, and in that instant, James ran. He could still hear the sound of her anklets echoing as he hurried back to Mark. When he reached his friend, he tried to wake him up. Mark regained consciousness, clutching James and crying, "What happened?" James asked. Mark, still shaking, explained how he had seen the woman and how she had screamed at him, her voice like that of a demon. He had tried to escape, but she had caught him and pinned him down before he passed out. Shaken, both men left the courthouse and went to a nearby diner to calm down. There, they spoke with the owner, who listened carefully and told them, "What you saw isn't an illusion. It's real. Years ago, a woman named Claire Roberts came to this courthouse. She was a prostitute. But she wanted to marry a wealthy businessman and wanted her profession to be removed from her legal records. She appealed to the court, but they cruelly rejected her request. Heartbroken and shamed, she went to her fiancé's home only to find him arrested on false charges. Desperate and lost, Claire disappeared. Weeks later, they found her body buried in his backyard. She had been murdered, her head severed, and her body left exposed, but her anklets remained on her feet. Ever since then, her spirit has haunted the courthouse, still seeking the justice she never received. The diner owner continued, "She's not the only one." There was another story from the 19th century about a poet named Thomas, who spoke out against corrupt authorities. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he was tortured and starved until he died. It's said that his spirit still wanders the halls, asking for water, hoping that someone will help him. After hearing these stories, Mark and James left, disturbed by what they had experienced. They realized that the court they had just left was haunted by the restless spirits of those denied justice. Even today, people claim to hear Claire's anklets at night and to see Thomas wandering the halls, pleading for water. The court, a place of judgment and decisions, had become a prison for these souls, bound to the place where they were wronged, still waiting for the justice they never received.